Let us get going. We've got a nice crowd and I'm sure more people will join us as we go along. So hello everyone, I'm Susan Lerner. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause New York. And I'm so glad you could join us for today's town hall. We'll be doing these now every other Thursday at 6:30 p.m. for the foreseeable future. People are telling us there are a lot of town halls and a lot of competition for people's online time. So that means that our next town hall will be Thursday, May 28th. We'll be keeping you posted on what's going on with our priority issues and bringing in special guest speakers on a range of topics. Please feel free to let us know who you'd like to hear from or a topic that you'd like us to discuss in a future town hall. Before we get started though, I'd like to outline our agenda for the call and go over some of the Zoom features that we'll be using. As in prior town halls, we're going to be using the Zoom chat. To access the chat, click on the speech bubble icon titled Chat at the bottom of your screen. That will open the chat, and at the bottom you'll see a field where you can type up your questions. Please make sure to hit enter when you finish typing your question, and if you can, include your name and your zip code. So also you can drop in suggestions of topics you'd like to have us address in future sessions. During the call, we will also ask you to answer a poll regarding our topic of discussion tonight, the January 23rd primary. We'll share a link to the poll in the chat and it will also pop up on your screen. Just click on the link to participate in the poll. We'll also provide you with ways to get involved with protecting our democracy, providing links to sign up on the chat as well. We're recording this meeting and posting it up on our website. Tonight, we'll also, and posting it on our website. You can view some of our previous town halls and our first ever book club event there and on our YouTube channel. So just to briefly summarize, during this call, we'll discuss the status of the presidential primary. We'll talk about new ways to vote in June. We'll briefly talk about a recent executive order that came down since our last town hall. And we'll discuss how you can get to participate in the GOT SAFE V, Get Out the Safe vote, via phone banking and postcard writing. And you can see a link right now in the chat to sign up for that campaign right away. You'll also see a link in the chat for next week's campaign trainings. So if you are interested in joining us phone banking or writing postcards, we're going to have two trainings next week. And of course, as I said, we're going to find out what your concerns are about the primaries in June, and we're going to end up with a question and answer period. So as we're discussing things and a question occurs to you, do put it in the chat because we'll keep track and that will speed up the question and answer. It's actually a good thing that we have too many people to unmute everybody. And so we ask you to put your questions in the chat and we'll keep track of the questions and answer as many as we can. So I'd like to start with updates on the things that have been going on since we had our last town hall, which was a week ago Tuesday, when we were joined by the Leadership Conference for Civil and Human Rights with a campaign to get our elected officials, our legislature, back into session. Interestingly enough, on Thursday, as some of you may be aware, excuse me, I'm going to take some water and see if I can get rid of this frog in my throat from allergies. I believe it was last Thursday when a state Supreme Court here in New York, a judge announced that the presidential primary, which had been canceled by the New York State Board of Elections, was now going to be back on track. And the lawsuit is an interesting one. It was brought by Andrew Yang, who is a contender for the Democratic presidential nomination, who announced that he was suspending his campaign and various New York voters who wanted to be Yang delegates to the Democratic Convention. They filed the lawsuit saying that their constitutional rights had been violated by the cancellation of the presidential primary. They were joined as plaintiffs in intervention by a number of individuals who wanted to have the ability to go on the ballot to be delegates on behalf of Bernie Sanders, even though Sanders also has suspended his presidential primary. And the suit was opposed by the State Board of Elections, who pointed out that without the presidential primary, where the presidential nominee was a foregone conclusion, since there was only going to be Joe Biden left on the ballot as an actual contender for the presidential nomination, there were the parts of 35 counties which would not have any primary at all, and that under the current public health emergency, it made sense to minimize the need to hold any elections where there really were not contests on the ballot. The judge disagreed and decided that the presidential primary should go back on schedule, not so much because of the ability to vote for potential presidential nominees who had withdrawn their nomination, but because the individual plaintiffs who were delegates were denied the right to have voters choose them to be delegates to the Democratic Convention. The State Board of Elections has appealed that decision, feeling that the expense and threat of illness is too immediate to not try and reverse the lower court's ruling. And it's being heard on an expedited basis, and it's my understanding that the case will be argued before a first department court division of appeals tomorrow. And we could have a decision as early next week, either saying that the lower court was right and the presidential primary should be held, or reversing the lower court. Depending on what happens in that case, by the first department, the state may decide to appeal all the way to the Court of Appeals. So, or not. So we may have some certainty next week, but we may not. There's a possibility that whichever way this appeal goes, the losing party might decide to appeal it further and go all the way up to the State Court of Appeals, which is our highest state court in New York. So stay tuned. Right now, the presidential primary is on. And as I said, depending upon the courts, that could change. Certainly, for many voters, there will be a primary whether or not the presidential primary is on their ballot. Again, parts of counties where there would not be anything on the ballot. But the June 23rd primary was originally scheduled as a congressional primary and as a state legislative primary. And there are many districts across the state where there are primary contests. And we'll be talking about some of them later on when we talk about our Get Out the Vote campaign, because we've tried to hone in on some districts where we know there are active campaigns and that voters should have an opportunity to weigh in on some of these races. And interestingly enough, following his pattern of issuing executive orders, last Friday, Governor Cuomo issued a lengthy executive order, and one of its items had to do with the June 23rd primary and absentee balloting. And there, the governor clarified that if you request an absentee ballot for the June 23rd election and you use temporary illness as your justification for getting that ballot, which an earlier executive order set up, then that absentee ballot application is only good for the June 23rd primary. Right now, it's very much up in the air how we're going to conduct our general election in November. If there are no changes, then there won't be expanded absentee. And, you know, we'll all be going to the polls. I think that there's a very real possibility that there could be some changes made. And we at Common Cause New York, with our coalition partners at Let New York Vote, are urging the legislature to come back into session and clarify how we're going to vote in November, extend the expanded absentee and the ability to apply for an absentee ballot electronically to our elections in November. But again, that hasn't happened yet. And I very much doubt that the governor would issue an executive order now for the general election. So instead, he's clarified the very limited scope of the expanded absentee from his earlier executive order. So every week, it's interesting in terms of what's happening one way or another regarding our upcoming elections. We hope, you know, we thought we were getting some clarity on the presidential. I'm hopeful we won't have more executive orders, but there are some ways in which we know that there is a different way for us to vote in June. And I'm going to ask Sarah Goff, the Common Cause New York Deputy Director, to talk about what we can expect and how we're going to be able to vote in June. Sarah.
Thank you, Susan. So as many of you know, and the reason why in part we're having this call is to discuss all the changes to our June primary election. And so we're launching a huge GOTV campaign, which I will not get into, but the three main messages that we want to instill both with voters and to our activists are that we have more options than ever to vote this primary. And so the way that we're thinking about it is threefold. For folks who do not feel comfortable going to the polls, you can vote absentee. And that process starts now. We'll be releasing additional information and devote a whole page on our website to all the information that you need to vote absentee early next week. But in the meantime, if you check the chat, we will be posting resources and providing links to detailed information on how to apply for an absentee ballot application, because voting absentee in New York is a two-step process. So first you have to apply for the ballot and then you actually vote. So the BOE, upon receiving your application, will mail you a ballot that you can then in turn return to your local board of elections. So that's option number one. The second, as we saw in November of last year, we can vote early again. So this would be the second time folks can vote early in New York. Early voting starts June 13th and runs through the 21st. Location and poll times will vary by county. We'll also post those links in the chat so you can see if you want to vote in person and you want to vote early, where to go and when you can go. And third, we still have election day. So polls are open June 23rd from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. across the state. So fortunately now more than ever, we have plenty of options for New York voters, because even in states like Colorado that are nearly 100% vote by mail, and we are transitioning in New York to expanding options for voters who do not want to go to the polls, they still maintain in-person voting options. And so that is in large part our recommendations for New York for June and certainly through November, is that we want to have options for voters. And there will always be voters who need an in-person option. Maybe you didn't get your ballot in the mail, or there's a need for additional language access services. We also have folks in the disability rights community who do need additional support that they can't just, quite frankly, get from home. And so there will always be a need for an in-person voting option. And so we are definitely thrilled to see what we would describe as a portfolio of options for voters in June and hopefully in November, so folks don't have to choose between their health and their vote, and everyone feels safe and secure exercising their franchise. And so that is, in a nutshell, our options this year. And I will turn things back over to Susan and Shabd to walk through our GOTV campaign.
Great. In the chat, we've posted some links that allow you to get to the appropriate place to apply online for your absentee ballot, as Sarah was talking about. So this election is a challenge, right? I don't think I need to tell anybody how challenging just daily life is right now, with the pause order that we're under, and unclear when the order will be lifted in different parts of the state at different times. And I think people are rightly concerned, as Sarah said, choosing between the right to vote and your health. So I think a substantial number of people are going to be, frankly, frightened to vote in person. Some will, some won't. But because of the changes, the expansion of absentee, the cancellation of the presidential primary, now it's back on, it might be off again, there is a fair amount of voter confusion. And remember, originally our presidential primary was scheduled for April 28th. So with all of these changes, we are definitely concerned that voters can very well be confused. One of the most frequent questions that we and some of our partners in talking to folks who don't pay a lot of attention here is the question, is there going to be a primary? When people hear that the presidential primary is canceled, they assume that all primaries are canceled. So we're really very concerned about an unusually low turnout in a state where, unfortunately, historically, we have low turnout already. The voters will be confused. Voters won't know what changes are taking place, what is or isn't appropriate, and with confusion, just end up not voting. If they don't know to look out for an absentee ballot application in the mail, I can well anticipate that some voters will get it in the mail and say, what the hell is this? I didn't ask for this, and toss it. So we think that this is an opportunity and frankly an obligation to try and provide voters with information about the coming June 23rd primary, and now the choices that they have with three possible ways to vote in June. So we've set up a graphic. We'll be doing a lot of social media. We've shared the graphic presentation with our partners, and we hope that you're going to start to see a fair amount of information about 3 ways to vote in June. But simply putting the word out is not really going to get us to the voters that we're concerned about. We're obviously concerned about all voters, but there are some communities which are traditionally marginalized, and often those communities are also the ones that are hardest hit by the virus, where people may not be at their registered residence because of health-related reasons or job-related reasons. They may not get the absentee ballot application, and they may just have no information about all of these scheduling changes that have taken place. So it is unfortunately not possible for us to contact every single voter who has a primary in the state. We've got to make some selections. And so what we've tried to do is to go through and identify places where we know there are active primaries separate and apart from the presidential primaries, and target the population which is most unlikely to vote, the population where we know there tends to be a low turnout. And it's a group of voters that at the national level are called the rising American electorate. Unmarried women, millennials, ages 18 to 34, and people of color. Minorities, as defined by the census, which would include people of color, Latinos, and recent new Americans who have just obtained their citizenship from, having come from abroad. But as I said, we can't even target every single voter within that category. So we have worked hard to try and narrow it down. And we've chosen 3 districts outside of New York City and 3 districts inside of New York City to concentrate on. One district is Congressional District 2 out on Long Island, where there's both a Democratic and a Republican primary, where there are people running to succeed Republican Congressman Pete King. And that's been a very active congressional, I see somebody nodding their head on the video. That's been a very active congressional race for the last cycle or 2. So we think that there are some interesting choices which voters on the Democratic or the Republican side have to choose who should be their party nominee. And we want to be sure that the voters in the Rising American electorate in that district know that there's a congressional primary and that they have 3 ways to vote. We have selected a CD 17, which is an open seat in the Hudson Valley. And interestingly enough, within CD 17, there's a portion of that congressional district, which is Senate District 38, and that also has an open seat. So there will be voters who will have an active primary for the Senate district and an active primary for the congressional district. And in that Senate district, there's both a Democratic and a Republican primary. And then the 3rd district outside of New York City, which we've chosen, is Assembly District 125, which includes Ithaca, where there is a very active Democratic primary with, I think, 6 contestants, 6 potential people who are looking to be the Democratic nominee for that district. In New York City, the 3 districts that we've chosen are Congressional District 15, which is the way crowded Democratic field for that congressional Democratic nomination up in the Bronx, and Assembly District 35 in Queens, where you have an incumbent who is being challenged by a former state senator who had to resign because of corruption issues and is now trying to get back into the Senate. So we think that that is an active contest that voters will want to weigh in on. And then in Brooklyn, we are focusing on what I call the northern portion of Congressional District 9. And there's a portion of Congressional District 9, which is currently occupied by Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. And she has at least 1, and I think possibly 2 challengers contending for the Democratic nomination, a Democratic nomination race, which was quite close in the last election cycle. And there's a portion of that district where you have an active Senate Democratic primary for Senate District 25, where Senator Velmanette Montgomery has retired, and also a portion of that district which contains a part of Assembly District 57, where Assembly Member Walter Mosley has a challenger for the Democratic nomination. And particularly here in the city, we know that there are really a significant number of voters who fall within the Rising American electorate category. So we've got a lot of people that we want to help really learn about the primary and understand what their contests are and how they can exercise their right to vote during this very confusing time. So I'm going to turn it over. Oh, and I do want to emphasize that the scripts for both the postcards and the phone banking are classic get out the vote scripts. All that we are doing is informing people that there is a primary on the 23rd and asking them if they plan to vote and informing them of the 3 different ways that they can vote, providing them information of how to get an absentee ballot if that's their choice, how to check their registration, how to find out where their polling place is for early voting or for election day, depending on how they plan to vote. So it's a nonpartisan GOTV, get out the vote, inform the voters campaign. And I want to make that very clear from the beginning. So Shabd, can you talk about the different ways that we are asking people to get involved in the campaign?
Hi, everyone. So obviously in the same way that we want people to be able to stay safe and vote from home if they need to, we're going to be doing our GOTV, get out the vote efforts from home. So that means what we've done so far, our plan is to do phone banking from home and postcard writing from home. And it's all really easy. The postcard writing, there's really not much to explain. You're going to be writing postcards to people. We will provide you sample language. And like Susan said, it's really important that this is helping voters and informed voters and not partisan and not, we're not working with any specific campaigns to get someone elected. We're just trying to let voters know about the change in rules and let them know that there is an election that affects them. And then we trust them to decide for themselves who they want to vote for. So we are going to ask, I know a lot of us are really passionate about specific candidates, but we are going to ask that as you do this work, that you try to stay neutral and just support people in their voting. And of course, with postcard writing, you won't get responses, but with phone banking, I'm going to have Kat speak to you in a minute, but she's been doing a lot of phone banking. And the great thing about providing information without asking anything of people is that they really appreciate it. So these postcards that they're getting are going to be one of the only things that people ever get from the campaign world, where we're not asking anything from them. These phone calls, we're not asking anything from them. We're not trying to win anything. We're literally just supporting them. And that's really a breath of fresh air to people. So they'll appreciate it, and you'll hopefully get positive responses from people in your phone banking. So we are gonna do trainings next Monday and Wednesday, and we ask that you sign up for them, where we can go over in depth how it works. But I'll just go over it like super briefly right now so that you have an idea. The postcard writing, as I said, we'll provide a sample language, and we ask that you try and stick more or less to it in, whatever way works for you. If you want to make it artistic or friendly and whatnot, but we'll be providing the basic information that needs to be given to people. And then we'll be working with our partners at New York Civic Engagement Table to pull really good lists, hopefully. Susan talked somewhat about who we're targeting, but the other great thing about who we're targeting is that we're looking for households where one postcard will reach many voters. And in an ideal world, what they're aiming for is that we'll get a household that has an always voter and a household that has a rarely voter. And so that always voter can encourage the rarely voter to vote. So we're doing some really fun stuff with the targeting. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna provide you with a list of names and addresses along with that script. And if you signed up already, or hopefully y'all are using the link in the chat right now, and we'll send out an email in the morning as well with the links in case you're on the phone and not seeing the chat. But when you sign up, you have an option to choose how many you are going to write. 50 postcards If you buy them from the USPS, you can buy pre-stamped postcards from the USPS, and they are only 39 cents, which is something like 4 cents above what a stamp costs. And
pretty.
so, sorry?
The stamps are pretty. You have your choice.
Yeah. And so 50 postcards cost just under $20. So we ask that you guys sign up for a minimum of 50 addresses, and whatever, there we go, whatever quantities you want to sign up for. Some people are signing up for a few hundred, some people are signing up for a few thousand. And just remember that you're responsible for covering the costs. But a really fun thing that I'm encouraging people to do is think about this as one of those marathon fundraisers that people do. And if you have community members who want to help out, but they don't have time, and you have time, but you don't, maybe, you know, $20 is okay. But if you want to do if you have time for 5,000 postcards, the money adds up. Get your friends to pool the money, get your neighbors to pool the money. And you can really easily reach 1,000 or 2,000 postcards if you have the capacity to do that. I think most friends are happy to pitch in $20 for 50 postcards for you. So you'll sign up for the number of postcards, and we will be sending out your addresses in units, personal address lists of 50 people at a time, because we want to make sure that we're actually getting through these people in a timely fashion. So you'll do your 50, and then you'll get back to Kat and I, and you'll say, hey, I finished my 50, can I get my next set? And we'll continue doling them out on a first come, first serve basis for as long as you guys have capacity to write postcards. So that is the postcard writing. And then the phone banking is also fairly simple. It's slightly more complicated because there's a tech aspect. And so if you want to do that, we definitely encourage you to join the training next week. If you want to do the postcarding and today you feel, if you're only doing the postcarding and today you feel like you have all your questions answered, then you don't need to join a training unless you have additional questions, and we'll be sending you the scripts and the addresses. But the phone banking is slightly more involved, and so we encourage you to join a training either Monday or Wednesday. There'll be 2 identical trainings, and if you're not able to join them, we will try to record it and make that available for you to watch from home, your own leisure. Of course, the trainings will also be from home. So with the phone banking, what you'll do is you'll get a login. Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't used this tool in a while. You'll get a login, you'll sign in, and what you'll see is a script with a few times throughout the script, there's questions, and then where the questions are, you'll have like an if then, like if they say yes, press this button and say this. If they say no, press this button and say this. And it's really important that you log stuff as you go along so that we know how people are responding. And so basically what happens is you have this page that has all the script and those buttons on it. And then on the top right, there will be the personal information. And it says the person's name, age, gender, and phone number. And you'll be using your own phone to call. And it's not through a automated system or anything. So your phone number will be visible to people. But we've done this. This is how phone banking has worked for all of the time that phones have existed up until the last year or 2. So it's tried and true, and we've never really run into any problems with it. But you do have to know that, like, you have to use your own phone. So make sure you have a phone that has minutes or good reception, etc. And then you'll just call the person, read the script. There will be, we need to put in, Susan, a voicemail script. We forgot to do that.
Yes, thank you.
We're still workshopping the script. We're going to have it up by tomorrow, and we'll be ready to launch this by Monday during the training. So we we'll have the script there and the phone number, and you'll just call one at a time. You'll either leave the voicemail for them or you'll speak to them. You make sure that you log it. You log whether or not you reached them or left a voicemail. And then when you're done, you just press the arrow and go to the next person. So it is, you know, slightly more involved because than the postcards because you have to use a computer, but it's actually really, really easy.
And you can, with the system, you work at your own speed. You don't have an automatic dialer where you're sitting and waiting for the dialer to hit a person. You decide, okay, I've made 5 phone calls. I'm going to go get some coffee and come back and make another 10 or 20.
Yes, and it's fantastic for that reason. And the great thing about being able to phone bank and postcard from home during like the way that we're doing this is that you can do 5 and then do more the next day. So it's really whatever works for you. And we ask that you, again, you sign up for a minimum of 50 postcards and a minimum of 2 hours for phone banking. But then we encourage you to do that 50 and that 2 hours really soon so that you can see if it's really comfortable and then maybe do more. Because we're really excited. We have over 150 people signed up to participate already, and that is incredible. We can reach tens of thousands of people this way. But as we know, there are not tens of thousands of voters in New York. There are millions of voters in New York. So the more capacity we have to reach voters, the more people we can reach, and that's really great. So we encourage you all to get started on the early side. Let's start reaching out to people, informing them about this. Of course, with the postcards, there's also a timeline there. You have to write them, you have to mail them, it has to get to them, then they have to have time to request their absentee ballot. So we want to do all of this. We're going to kick this off on Monday next week, and you can sign up already now. And then we want to get this all going as soon as possible, see how it goes, and keep adding to it. And so as part of that, we also add that in addition to doing the volunteering, that you help us recruit people. A bunch of you reached out to us asking how to do that, and it's really easy. You literally can just forward the email to people and they can sign up, and then we'll be able to provide them the information. But if you have an email list or a community group that you want to be able to sort of track who you're recruiting and how well your recruitment is working, I can actually give you a specific web link where we can track your recruitment and you can see whether or not it's working. And I'm doing that with some other projects, and it's great because then if you send out an email to 50 people and you only get 5 that sign up, you know that you need to reach out to them individually. So a lot of people who are sort of like upping themselves to super volunteer love this ability to track that. So if you do want to do that, or if you have any other questions about this stuff, reach out to me. My email is in the chat. And it's ssimon@commoncause.org if you're on the phone, ssimon@commoncause.org. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. And then I think that's all, Susan, unless I forgot something, but I'd love to give a chance for Kat, and if we have any BVA folks, to say hello here, because we have these great volunteer lead organizers who are going to be working with me on this project, and they'll be the ones that you'll be communicating with in addition to me throughout this. So I see Kat. Let's let Kat.
Hi, everybody. So for any of you out there who will be doing postcarding, I'm going to be working with Shabd. She had commented before about doing the sending out the lists as far as postcards are concerned, sending out the addresses and the lists of the individuals and the numbers. What I'm going to be doing is initially following up with the 100 some odd people just to make sure, on a one-to-one, to make sure that they are still interested in postcarding and establishing a relationship in that way, finding out if the number that they had previously said that they would, you know, commit themselves to was still the same number. And also following up again with the timeliness of getting, if this is what you want to do, then the timeliness of obviously getting the postcards and the stamps themselves. So it's really, which I've already started doing, making phone calls. So it's really kind of getting it and doing it now. That's the initial piece. And then the follow-up from my end, along with Shabd too, will be to just get back in touch with people, find out how they're doing. Do they have any questions? They will all know that they can contact me via email, via cell phone, if they have any questions about, you know, particulars about how they're writing on the card, where should it be, placement. I know it sounds funny, but a lot of times when people do postcards, they're like, well, wait, if I'm, you know, where should I place everything? You know, should I be committing, you know, to staying on one side, writing, the address on the other, and a host of things, just being there. So, and then of course, following up weekly with people as to how they've been doing and if they have any questions. But they'll know from the very beginning, if they have questions, they can, you know, reach out to me. And then of course, you know, following up if they finished, you want more. You want more postcards?
Always going to encourage you.
Always going to be that. So that's pretty much where my end is. I'm volunteering with phone banking, but the postcards, you know, will definitely be something so that it helps free up time on Shabd's and everybody else's busy schedule.
And I am so appreciative of that.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and to remind everyone, like, this role that Kat is taking on is also going to be because we don't want to give someone 2,000 addresses and have them sit there and not be sent out. So we're going to be doing them in quantities of 50. So you'll do the 50, then you'll report back to Kat that you finished, and then she'll send you the next 50, and so on and so forth. And maybe it'll be Kat emailing you, and maybe it'll be me. We'll figure it out as it begins, what makes the most sense. But you can reach out to her with any questions, and then make sure that you reach out to her when you finished your 50 so we can get you the next batch. And then Kat, do you want to just share with everyone for a minute your experience phone banking so far and how happy people are to receive the information about voting options?
Absolutely. Actually, I will. So I've been, and again, I know this is nonpartisan, so I will share it only with respect to a campaign that I've been involved in, and I won't mention. But the interesting thing is when I spoke to the campaign about doing phone banking, I said, you know, are you letting people know about absentee voting and the importance of it, and that because these are registered people, and for reaching them at home, hopefully it's the address that you will be receiving it. Because for me, it's very important, I'm sure as the rest of you, it's very important that they know that it's going to be arriving. What my concern is that they see it and they're like, what am I doing with this? What is this? And anyway, so I found that with this particular campaign, the way that we were doing the introductions was to say who we were, or is this the person? And the first thing, as opposed to mentioning the person who was running, the candidate, we said, are you aware of the fact that you will be able to vote absentee? I found so many people that immediately said, what are you talking about? As opposed to possibly my mentioning the candidate, and they're going, I don't want to, you know, which can happen. I don't want to talk politics, or I do, but that reluctance. I found so many people were receptive to my speaking to them about absentee voting. And then, of course, I segued, you know, after that, I segued into the candidate. But I find that with the phone banking, keep my fingers crossed, and everybody else, this may be something that people will not just hang up on you for. And
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and that was something that I was surprised at. And I had said to them, why don't you start out that way? And all of a sudden they were like, this was great. So anyway, that's what I'm sharing, you know, as far as phone banking is concerned.
I found that so helpful when you shared that with me the other day. I really do think that it
Yeah.
changes the way people receive that.
I was surprised, I'll be honest. It was not something that I had expected. It just happened. And I found that that was it. As opposed to other candidates that I've made phone banking for, and they have not mentioned absentee voting initially as like, hey, did you know this? And then you go into whatever else.
Thank you so much.
Whoever's got the phone ringing.
Yeah,
in-
that's me.
Oh.
I got it off.
Sorry.
I got it off. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you, Kat, for sharing, and
Thank
thank
you.
you again for stepping up into this role. We're so
Sure.
excited to have you on the team. I don't know if we have anyone from BVA on to say hello, but if you are on, we'll give you a minute just to say hi.
Nope, doesn't
Nope.
look like it.
So Brooklyn Voters Alliance will be taking the same role as Kat, but for the phone banking. So they'll be, and with the phone banking, of course, there's a different need, which is that you start getting feedback from people in real time. And so your questions might increase. And so they'll be available for you guys to reach out to, in addition to us with questions. We just want more people available for you for all of this than just one in case we're in a meeting or off work.
And to be sure that you feel supported, and we're all in this together to reach out to as many voters as we possibly can.
Exactly.
So thank you, Shabd. Thank you, Kat. I see some familiar faces from earlier phone banks on the call. So I hope that those folks will volunteer or have already signed up. And now would be a good time, I think, for us to ask you to answer a poll question. Our question this evening has to do with how you feel about the upcoming June primary. And so Natalia's going to put the, here we go, the poll has just popped up. In light of the upcoming June 23rd primary, the upcoming election, what are you most concerned about for the primary? Are you concerned you won't receive your absentee ballot on time? Are you concerned that early voting sites will be too far away for you to travel to? That there will be fewer polling stations open on election day than what we're used to? Concerned that polling sites won't enforce health safety measures like offering hand sanitizers, wearing masks? Are you concerned the poll workers won't practice proper social distancing measures? And are you concerned that people will be confused and not vote? So we're asking you, what are you most concerned about? Pick one. And I'll give everybody a minute to answer, and then we have our results automatically. So.
Is this about ourselves personally or about what we?
Your personal concerns
Okay,
about
thank you.
the 23rd primary. What are you concerned about? So, whoa, we've got a very clear winner here so far. So I'm going to give it 3, 2, 1, and we are about to end the poll. Hopefully everybody's voted. This is your last chance. Poll is ended. Okay, so the clear winner is most people are concerned. 77% of the folks who answered said that people will be confused and not vote is their primary concern. Well, you're in the right place because we share that concern with you, and that's what the GOTV campaign is about. Second place winner at 17% is a concern that polling sites won't enforce health safety measures. I think a very valid concern, and one that in our advocacy roles, we're working to ensure is being addressed. 13% of people are concerned that they will not receive their absentee ballot on time. And then 7% there'll be fewer polling places open, and 3% concerned the poll workers won't practice proper social distancing measures. And nobody's concerned that their early voting sites will be too far away. So thanks for that. I'm glad we are very strongly on the same page about helping voters be able to vote for the June primary. And I think now is the time for us to address the questions that you have. Hopefully you've been putting them up in the chat. And we have a question for Sarah from Jill. Sarah?
Yeah, hi. So the question from Jill, excuse me, what's the deadline to request an absentee ballot for the primary? So the deadline to request an absentee ballot is June 16th. The good news is that we now have more ways than ever to apply for an absentee ballot. Under Cuomo's executive order, we can now apply for an absentee ballot online, via email, by mail. And if you're in New York City, you can also call the New York City Board of Elections to request an application, or by fax. But taking a step back from all of that, any registered voter who has a competitive primary on June 23rd will automatically receive an absentee ballot application in the mail, and that will include prepaid postage for the return envelope. So if you want to passively wait for the application in the mail, that's great. You don't have to do anything. But if you want to be proactive, and there's no value judgment in that statement, you have a plethora of options, like I said. So that's the good news, is that we have more options than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're concerned about waiting for the mail application, go online. You can now apply through email or directly on virtually every county's Board of Elections website for your absentee ballot. And let's see, question for you, Shabd, from Nina. Can you punch *67 before you call to make your call anonymously? Oops.
Sorry, I was muted. Is that what *67 does?
Yeah, that's what it does.
Then sure, why not? I don't know, does it cost money? If it costs money, just be aware of that, I guess.
Yeah, I don't.
It doesn't.
I'm sorry?
It doesn't cost money.
Okay, great. You know, you may get fewer people who pick up if you use the anonymous feature, right? I will often let phone numbers that I don't recognize, that don't have a name associated with them, roll to voicemail. So, but that's a decision for you. If you would prefer to use that feature of your phone and call anonymously, feel free to do so. Sarah, we've got another question for you.
I also got I got some private questions which I could answer.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sharon asked if I could touch on virtual postcard writing parties. And I think that is a fantastic idea, Sharon. Thank you for bringing that up. You can host a virtual party with your friends on Zoom or Facebook chat or Google Hangouts or whatnot. Or if your eyes are getting exhausted, you could do a phone party to a conference call. I know me personally, my eyes are a little tired these days. But yeah, do it with friends. And when you're writing, it's not the same as phone banking. So absolutely have a glass of wine and chat with your friends while you're doing it. And that is a great way to get more people involved. So the 2 hours that you're going to commit to it that evening, you invite 5 friends in and you got 12 hours of postcarding in one go. Also, that's a great way to plow through your own lists. If you want to share that list with a group, feel free when you're signing up, feel free to sign up for yourself or to sign up for like a group of folks. Oh, I forgot to talk about how it's a competition.
Please do.
We are, why not? We're going to make this fun. We're going to send prizes to the folks who write the most postcards and to the folks who make the most phone calls. And we can see with the postcards, you're going to be asking us for each 50 that you're doing, so we know how many you've done. And we pray that you tell us the truth, because we don't want these addresses not getting written to. And with the phone bank, we can see on the back end who's making calls. So so it's fantastic. And we can follow up with you. And at the end of this, we'll send a prize to the folks who have completed the most voter outreach. And so if you want to sign up for like a group of folks instead of just for yourself, that's also fine. And then it's just up to you to distribute those addresses as you see fit. For the phone banking, each person needs their own login. And if you want to do this with a group of folks, you also can give them the link so they can sign up themselves if they want to sign up for their own 50.
Cool. And I do want to mention, you know, if you're part of an organization that you think would be interested in recruiting volunteers, if you email Shabd, she can send a recruiting email that you can share with that organization. Because I know we've gotten some questions from folks who are part of groups that they believe would be interested in volunteering for this. So recruit friends any way you can. The more voters we reach, the more satisfactory it will be. Sarah, do you see the next question?
Sure. So this question, excuse me, is from Judith. If applications are due by the 16th and the election is on the 23rd, how will the actual ballots arrive to voters? And then how will the voters get the ballots postmarked by the deadline? So this is a great question, but really speaks more importantly to the importance of submitting your application. If you're doing it by actual physical paper and mailing it in, the earlier the better. The BOE, at least in New York City, is already mailing out absentee ballots as of May 8th, and they will continue to do so on a rolling basis. However, regardless, they will continue to mail out ballots as long as they receive the applications through the 16th, as long as your actual absentee ballot is postmarked by the 22nd and the Board of Elections receives it by the 30th, the ballot will be counted. So it's a bit of a tight deadline in the scenario that you've outlined, but that's why we're encouraging folks to submit the application early and, if possible, do it in a non-paper mail dependent form.
Right. And of course, the possibility that you haven't gotten your ballot on time because there are the vagaries of the mail and other things which can intervene is one of the reasons why we believe it's so important that we have 3 different ways to vote. We always need to have in-person voting as a backstop on this. And so 3 ways: absentee, early voting in person, and election day in person as well. And just to reiterate, irrespective of whether or not the presidential primary goes forward, if there is a congressional or a state legislative primary in your district, you will automatically receive an application for an absentee ballot. And there was a question from Kathy, I think. In the past, previously, if you requested an absentee ballot by sending in a letter or phoning your Board of Elections, they sent you the absentee ballot and they sent you the paper application. In this emergency situation, they are only going to send you the ballot. You will not receive a ballot with an application. You just fill out your ballot and send it back. Filling out your ballot's a little bit of a challenge. You need to be sure that you follow all of the steps, that you fill out your ballot correctly, that you put it in the privacy envelope, that you seal the privacy envelope, you fill out the envelope, and you have to be sure to sign it. Because if they can't check your signature, they will not count your ballot. And And so that's a very important factor. And we're going to have informational material once the ballots go out, reminding people how they actually get cast. And let me see if there were I think there were a few other questions that were here. Just looking through. Right. Yeah, I think that was the main one. Yeah. A question, how do we know whether the boards of elections are going to enforce the safety regulations? The Federal Election Assistance Commission and the CDC have issued specific guidelines. And I think that's an area for activism on our parts to be sure that local boards of elections are doing everything that they can, providing hand sanitizers, setting up polling places so that there's appropriate distance, being sure that the poll workers have masks and gloves, and there are a whole host of things that are suggested to be done, a regular cleaning schedule to disinfect all surfaces and machines, I think once an hour at a minimum. And we know that, at least in New York City, they're taking it very seriously because they actually, before the governor's first executive order, early voting for the then scheduled April 28th, no, the then scheduled Queens special borough president special election began. And the New York City board did quite a good job of promulgating the necessary rules, even to the point of changing the surface that's used for the electronic poll books so that it is easier to disinfect. And they actually have done a good job of figuring out what needs to be done to make polling places as safe as possible during this health emergency. We hope that the boards of elections in other counties follow their leads, and as advocates, we can call the board and ask them, what are you doing to be sure that polling places are safe? And I encourage everyone to do that. It's easy to find, it's not as easy as it could be, but you can find the number of your local Board of Elections on the New York State Board of Elections website. There's a map, you click on your county and you get the contact information. For them to hear from the public that we are concerned and we want to be sure that they're taking appropriate health protecting steps would be excellent. And I urge anybody who has the time to make that call and let them know the public is watching and concerned and holding them to the appropriate standard.
Susan, I have a thought and on this. I'm just going to throw it out and shoot me down if this is a terrible idea. But keeping in mind that most people have good intentions and that our boards of elections are taking this really seriously and are completely overwhelmed right now with all of the changes that are back and forth and back and forth. The boards of elections members that we are communicating with, that we work with, are taking this all very seriously. So keeping in mind that people have good intentions and you don't want to attack them on it, in addition to making phone calls, would it be helpful if poll workers, which this question came from a poll worker, and voters wrote letters to the editor about this, saying, not attacking boards of elections, but saying, I'm going to be working the polls and I want to make sure I'm safe, or I'm going to be voting in person and I want to make sure I'm safe. Is that helpful?
I think absolutely. Any way in which we can make it clear that there's an expected standard of conduct as a member of the public is a positive thing to do. You can call the board and ask them and relate concerns. You can also write a letter to the editor, particularly local papers, rather than trying to get into the larger daily newspapers in the cities, is a very, very effective way to get the message through. We've got a question from Nina. So if the court decides to cancel the presidential primary, your district will only have a primary if there are people running in the primary for either Congress, Assembly, or State Senate. And we know there are a number of districts where, other than the presidential primary, there is actually nothing else on the ballot. But right now, the presidential primary is on. So that means everybody across the state has at least the presidential primary to vote on. And a question from Stephanie. So in some districts, we'll be writing or calling to only Democrats, and in other districts, we'll be writing to both representatives and Democrats. That's correct. What the script has you say is there's a primary for, in your party, for your congressional nominee, or your state Senate nominee, whatever the case is. The script that you will be given for the district that you are calling or writing will be specific to the races that that particular voter has on their ballot. So you're not going to be calling somebody and saying, well, there might be a primary for Congress, Assembly, or State Senate that you might be able to vote in. You will be able to say conclusively, hi, or to write, hi, I hope that you know that there is a primary in your district where you can choose your party's nominee for Congress as well as your party's nominee for State Senate. I'm thinking about that overlap between SD 38 and CD 17 in the Hudson Valley. Or for the rest of CD 17, what you would be telling the voter is there's a congressional primary in your party that you can vote in. So we will have that tailored to you.
And
Shabd.
that means that you have to be really careful to read the script or double check the sample language when you get the information for who to contact, because we'll be starting with one district, and then as we finish moving through them, you might be writing 50 postcards to one group of people, and then we might have finished that district. We might be on to the next district by the time you do your next 50. So make sure that you double check your script and that you're writing the right script to the right people, and same on the phone banking. If for some reason someone needs their 2,000 addresses at once with just one script because you're having a party and you want to make sure that it's the same script for everything, we're here, we're human, we can pivot, we can get you all 2,000 at once. We just don't want to be sending out 2,000 that don't get written in time. So if it's important to you to stick to the same script and you're sure you can do it, just let us know. Otherwise, make sure to double check your script every time you start writing.
Yeah.
And also to add to that Republican and Democrat question, that's absolutely correct, but there aren't that many Republican primaries, so the majority will be Democrat, if that matters to you. It does not matter to us.
Exactly. And we've got some really interesting questions coming up. Judith asks, what if the automatically sent application and the requested application cross each other in the mail, and the person sends in one ballot, but then gets the second ballot and also sends in the second ballot as well? How can a mistake be distinguished from fraud? First, you will not, no matter how many times you request an absentee ballot, you're only going to get one. Right? So if you request one by email and then you get the application in the mail and you decide a belt and suspenders is the way to go and you mail the application back, the Board of Elections keeps track in the voter rolls when they send you an absentee ballot, and they do not send you more than one. Question from Robin. If you receive an absentee ballot and for whatever reason decide to vote in person, will you be able to vote in person? So long as, yes, the answer is yes. Even if you sent in your absentee ballot and then you decide, which we do not recommend, make up your mind to do one or the other. But some people may send in an absentee ballot, then change their mind and go and vote in person, the absentee ballot will not be counted. In-person voting always trumps the absentee. And the fact that you've received an absentee ballot but decide not to cast it does not prevent you from voting in person. You always can vote in person. Sorry, I have to, my phone. Judith, if the presidential primary is canceled in June, will there be one rescheduled? No, there would not be, because there is only one active candidate for the presidential nomination. And if the court decides that the desire to vote for party positions is not sufficient in this time of crisis, then there would not be a presidential primary. Question from Carol. Can you tell us what other organizations like the New York State League of Women Voters are doing to prepare for the June 23rd election? Always interested that we coordinate efforts. Absolutely, Carol. And we do through Let New York Vote. The League has a very detailed website, everything you could possibly think of in terms of the information relating to the June 23rd primary. And we put the link up in the chat earlier. The League is also preparing some very detailed instructional videos to distribute to through their YouTube channel. And they do a great job of really getting into the weeds, really very, very complete. The materials that we're preparing are much more summary. They are meant to be quick, grabby, graphic, and the basic information. And for people who want a lot of information and all of the details and the ins and outs, we're sending them to the board's website. And we're also inviting them to recruit their members to help phone bank and to send out postcards. And it'll be up to the League as to whether they choose to make the volunteer opportunity available to their people. And I know that they are sponsoring relatively limited number of candidate forums here in the city. And I don't know how many they're sponsoring outside of New York City. So they are doing their best to get information out as well. They have a very detailed pamphlet as well as the online information that is basically everything you might want to ask about the June 23rd primary and how to vote. And we're coordinating with our coalition partners in the Let New York Vote coalition in terms of providing information. In fact, just today, we have finalized the graphics, which you'll be seeing soon. And we sent them out to our organizational partners, and we immediately got the offer from one partner to translate the English into Chinese. And now we're looking for somebody to help translate into Spanish as well. So we're very actively involved in collaborating and dividing up the work so that we're not just duplicating each other's efforts when there's so much to do in such a short time frame.
Good, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Okay, I think that is all that we've got in terms of questions at the moment, and you know, we're well into our time, and so I want to thank you and again urge you. Question from Judith: does Common Cause coordinate with swing state organizations? I'm not sure exactly how to answer that. If they wanted to use our nonpartisan materials for informational purposes, absolutely. But swing state organizations are partisan, and they usually have a partisan message that would be improper for us to carry. So anybody is welcome to use our informational materials. The 3 Ways to Vote in June campaign is not branded. Common Cause so that anybody can pick up the graphics and distribute them to in any way that they feel would be helpful.
And I just want to say, in the time that we've been on this call, we have 14 new volunteers. So thank you for everyone who signed up. I imagine a lot of you were already signed up before you got on this call, but we have a few dozen people on this call. So if there's anyone that's here that hasn't done it yet, the link is in the chat. We can paste it back in again, so you don't need to search for it. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask. I'm going to do that right now. So make sure you sign up to volunteer to get out the vote. Reach out to me directly if you want a special link for recruitment. Otherwise, just forward the email that we've been sending out and invite anyone to participate.
And I want to acknowledge Andrew's comment that he is a Spanish translator and could potentially help us on the question, how long is the text? Extraordinarily short. This is basically 3 ways to vote, and then the way 1, way 2, way 3. And it's not
about 20
not
words.
yeah, not lengthy at all. Because the whole point of what we're doing is to try and distill it down to the clearest information that has the basic information that a voter needs, and then send them to places where they can get much more detailed information if they need it. Okay, great. So thanks everybody for calling in, and excellent to have you signed up. And we look forward to educating as many voters as we possibly can and dispelling confusion and having a successful June 23rd primary with your help. Stay safe, everybody, and we will be in touch in the coming weeks, and then calendar 2 weeks from tonight for the next town hall.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.